we've got most of our folks here. I want to, as soon as Jerry shows up, I want to especially thank Jerry Power, who really was instrumental in organizing this panel. This is the Regional Data Sharing Panel. Data sharing is really very important. I like to say that data drives smart. If you've got a smart anything, a smart city, a smart community, a smart department, a smart project or activity, it's running on data. Data is going to be driving that effort. But of course, data is really a two-way sword in many ways. In addition to being very important for real-time operations and informing and making predictions, it's also something that has a lot of personal characteristics sometimes associated with it. Your citizens care a lot about their data and how it's being used. The city wants to take best advantage of it. We need to be able to share it across boundaries, both within communities and across communities. All of these things make data a fairly tricky way of dealing with this. And of course, NIST and the Global City Team Challenge has recognized this and has created a supercluster in the area. And in fact, we're going to see multiple superclusters represented here today in this regional data sharing panel. The panel is going to talk about how we can share data in a managed and controlled environment, how we can really deal with this very multidimensional and complicated task and the complexities involved in doing that. We need to be able to benchmark, compare, collaborate, and really cross regional boundaries. And in order to do that, we've got the best panel I can imagine to go and address these issues. I'd like to just briefly introduce them. Heather Crondall, wave Heather in case they can't read the small print. Oops, Heather, turn on your camera. Heather Crondall is the enterprise architect and open government strategist for the GCTC Civic Data Hub and Service Delivery Platform project. She's an enterprise architect and open government strategist, and currently the founder and co-chair of the NIST Global City Teams Challenge Civic Data Hub and Service Delivery Platform project. Thank you very much for joining us, Heather. We also have working with her Heidi. Heidi has got up earlier this morning compared to the rest of us because of time zones. Heidi, thank you for joining us. She's the Chief Data Officer for the Alaska Department of Health and Social Services. I bet she's a really busy woman given the current situation and what's going on. So thank you for taking some time to go and share with us. Raimundo Rodolfo, thank you very much. Coral Gables, of course, has been a leading smart city for many years. They've had a very concentrated and focused effort. Raimundo has been working for more than 26 years across industries, delivering value, growth, and sustainability. He's the Chief Innovation Officer and Director of Information Technology for the City of Coral Gables, responsible for all those kinds of things. And he's also a co-chair of NIST Global City Teams Challenge Data Supercluster. Thank you for doing that, Raimundo. It's really very important. Lan Jensen, Chief Executive Officer for Adaptable Security. Go and give us a wave, Lan. Thank you. So everyone can go and see who she is there. She currently serves as the co-chair for the Cybersecurity and Privacy Advisory Committee for the NIST Department of Homeland Security Smart Secure Cities and Communities Challenge. And I hope you mention that project as you make your address. I think it's very important that we take a look at what we can do in the security and privacy areas. It's one of the things that worry all of our citizens who are gathering their data together. And last but certainly not least, and again, thank you for helping to organize this, Jerry. Jerry is the Chief Executive Officer for i3 Systems. i3 has to do, of course, with the Internet of Things. The i3 Consortium, he's one of the founders of that, which is a community-driven nonprofit organization enabling community information networks by democratizing data networks. So if data drives democracy in Jerry's world. This is a project that he's been working on, comes out of USC, that I've been following for a few years now. I think it's been really very influential. So you've got one of the best panels you could possibly have to talk about data. What are we going to do today? We're going to, let's see, can we advance to the next slide? Do I get to advance the slide? How does that work? Okay, yes, these are These are pieces of a pie, and since it's getting close to Thanksgiving, one of the members of the panel, who shall remain anonymous in case you don't like the idea, came up with this wonderful idea of a Thanksgiving pie of a data sharing strategy, because it's not something that you can just get off the shelf. You need to bake it with key ingredients. And those key ingredients include the sections we're going to be talking about today. The Data Hub group, which includes Heather and Heidi, is going to talk about the user experience. Rodolfo is going to talk about data interoperability and the Smart City Hub public platform. We're going to have Lan talking about security and privacy. And we're going to have infrastructure addressed by Jerry, especially the Internet of Things infrastructure. So you've got all the ingredients for a terrific Thanksgiving pie here. Next slide, please. So with that, we're going to have each of the panelists give us 5 minutes, no more than 5 minutes, on one of these pieces of this pie, of this puzzle being put together. And we're going to begin with Heather on Civic Data Hub and Service Delivery Platform. So Heather, go ahead.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
We can.
Okay, wonderful. So can we advance the slide one more, I think? There we go. There we go. So I wanted to start by just saying that I really appreciate the effort that's gone into putting together this this entire workshop. Everyone has really pulled their efforts so much, and I've appreciated every bit of it. This is such a wonderful opportunity to come together and talk about interoperable data sharing, and really work with a lot of really civic-minded people. So this is a terrific opportunity. I'd like to start by talking a little bit about the history of this project. And it started out as a project that was with the state of Alaska. And I was working for the Office of Management and Budget for the state of Alaska. And I was establishing a data and digital asset management program for the state. Through that, I had a chance to start working with Heidi through the Department of Health and Social Services. And we were able to get quite far with the Data Hub and Service Delivery Platform project for the state of Alaska when it became of interest, and we started working with Jean Rice and Saku with NIST and the GCTC project. And we have been able, because of their hard work and their dedication to the mission, to really to pull a lot of people into this project and to move it forward. So moving back to when I was working for the state of Alaska, one of my jobs was as a technology architect for the Office of Management and Budget. And one of the things that I used to do is I used to look at the capital improvement projects when they came in. And there was a lot of crossover in the IT projects. And we noticed that there was significant crossover between projects like statewide longitudinal data systems and health information exchanges. And I kept seeing that the state of Alaska kept spending a lot of money and investing in infrastructure over and over because they weren't looking at their information or system purchases in an abstract enough way. So the same system that could have been creating data interoperability for health and human services data could have been used for education data and other data throughout the state. So what I had done is I had, recommended that we start looking at making some changes in the way that we procure our information systems and the way that we look at designing our information systems. And that brings us to the Civic Data Hub and Service Delivery Platform project, which is through the GCTC. And in that, we're going to be looking at developing several different things. One is, and you'll see from on the screen that we have 4 different areas that are kind of overlapping this map. And I want to talk a little bit about each one of them. The first one is data. And we know that we have disparate data across the country, across our information systems internally, and even data within organizations, which Heidi will talk a little bit about next, that we can't connect to. The platform, our service delivery platform, is going to allow us to connect to existing infrastructure across the country and even internationally, which will allow us to kind of leverage these commodity components of an information system. So if you think of modular development of an information system, you've got microservices, and they exist in data centers across the country. So the idea is that through the Open Civic Architectural Framework, which is a reference framework, that we will wrap these microservices in a standardized API layer. What this does for local governments is that it allows us to be able to not have to deal with systems integration in the way that we do right now when we have a data project, or we have an information system like a health information exchange or a statewide longitudinal data system. It will allow us to just concentrate on the application layer, because the integration has already been done by those vendors that are contributing their microservices, and they will have standardized to that standard within the Open Civic Architectural Framework. What this has amazing effects, economic effects. This opens up the market to other vendors, makes it easier, eases entry into the market. It also eases entry into the market for those who want to provide civic services that are outside of government. I think I've got, do I have 1 more minute? Oh, I'm sorry, Glenn, I can't hear you.
You're in the last minute. This is the sign that you're in the last minute. And this is
Okay,
the sign
wonderful.
that you're done.
Okay, all right, perfect. So, so the impact of this is great. In the previous session, I was listening to Mark Kritz's talk, and he was talking about tying disparate efforts together. And this is one of the objectives of this project, is tying these disparate efforts together, because we have, this work is being done, in isolated areas, by different groups, and we're really bringing everyone together to work on this standard and create the data hub and the service delivery platform.
Look at that, perfect timing. Okay, Heidi.
Good afternoon, can you hear me?
We can.
Wonderful. If you don't mind advancing the slide 1. There we go, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. This is Heidi Langdorfer. I am the Chief Data Officer for the Alaska Department of Health and Social Services. And as Heather mentioned, we have been working together on a data hub concept for several years now, both within and outside of the state of Alaska. And I have come to my data science place from a more non-traditional background. I have a master's in public health and biostatistics, and I have spent my 8 years with the state with health and social services, both on the Medicaid side and the public health side, as well as other state and local and university public health avenues. So I kind of come in this middle information layer, where I have seen several universality to the data initiatives that we take, and by extension, the IT initiatives that we take, to Heather's point. Really what I have seen, and what I have also griped about at several conferences myself, is data sharing and how difficult it is to share data among health and social services programs, the manual and paper-based business processes, compensating for disparate systems. My current initiative right now, I've been pulled into Alaska's COVID response once again. I call it death to faxes because we are literally drowning in faxes right now to get our COVID lab testing from a hospital or a provider to our public health lab, and from our public health lab back to the provider and there for the patient. And when we mapped out that business process, we realized there was data entry at the EHR, faxing to the public health lab, data entry at the public health lab. The test was run, the result was printed out, faxed to the provider, who then manually entered the result into their EHR, and then the patient finally got that information. So that has been one of many fax-based processes that we're trying to eliminate, and along with the data entry, it is just, we have never reached the economy of scale in Alaska until COVID hit. And so while we have said this in theory for many years, it's really hit home along with the need for data sharing. And that, eventually leads to ineffective service delivery to our most vulnerable. And right now we're really looking at it. And sorry, I'm just so in COVID world, and there's so many examples with that it just seems so relevant right now. I mean, especially our homeless population up here in Alaska is experiencing COVID outbreaks because we cannot surround them with those services that the department offers, and because we don't have the interoperability with our data systems, and it's just taking too long. With that lens, that's where we kind of work together, Heather and I, to look at these universal solutions using ontologies to standardize data sharing based on legal imperatives. Anyone in Health and Human Services knows HIPAA, 42 CFR Part 2, and then you have state laws that really make data sharing a challenge and very complicated, and usually it takes longer because you have to get lawyers involved. Really hoping to take the subjectivity out of that data sharing, and one attorney's interpretation of HIPAA versus one data steward's interpretation of HIPAA. And then using semantic technologies and master data management to deduplicate collected data. I think I took 2 public health registries and overlaid their data dictionaries and found out that they were collecting 23 of the same fields, and separately and with no advantage at all. Obviously, it was even making our data quality worse. That is something that is very close to my heart, just given the limited staffing resources and the budget crisis that Alaska and I think everyone is facing. And really what we want this all to end up with is improving our service delivery for our clients, especially at the health and social service level. That's really what it's all about, and fulfilling our mission and supporting the programs and doing it. Other ways we want to see that happen is by better and faster data, less public funds spent on unnecessary and subjective tasks, again, the faxing and the duplicate data entry, and really looking to the next pandemic and how we can be more proactive versus reactive, as we've been with COVID. I keep saying we should have been doing this 5 years ago. We should have been doing this 10 years ago. And really strengthening that public health support and bringing the data together. I think I heard earlier data democratization, and I am all for that in this way, just to make it easier for people. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I think that's, we really wish we had more folks like you working in all of our governments to be able to make that happen.
Me too.
Let's move over now to Raimundo and Coral Gables. So you have a public open data hub platform, and so you're really putting the rubber to the road here. Tell us about how that works out.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to my colleagues for the great opportunity to learn from all of you and to share our story. So if we can go, please, to the next slide. And Glenn, I'm going to be looking forward to your signs. So basically, so for us, sharing data and collaborating, basically that's the blood of our smart city projects. You know, that's everything is data driven, and it makes a big difference and really quick. So we see it as part of the NIST GCTC data supercluster. We also see it as part of those smart region collaborations in South Florida, and also in our city, in city of Coral Gables, in the middle of the county. So we have a lot of traffic. We collect a lot of data points. And I always say metaphorically, so we want data to pay its rent. So we don't want to collect and aggregate data for the sake of aggregating data. So we want that data to be actionable, to provide insight and value in real time. We want data to be directly related to quality and to digital equity and to continuous improvement. So that data is that blood that fuels that continuous improvement and value streaming to our citizens. So because I came from the private sector as an engineer for many years in the telecommunications industry, before I was thinking about data, I was thinking about connectivity. So how are we going to be able to really make this happen from a practical standpoint? So what you see to the left is our smart city engineering framework. And at the foundation of that framework is high-speed communications, which pretty much is the way, the arteries that will really have that blood flowing, the blood of data flowing through our initiatives. So high-speed communication was key. And we spent years building that cyber infrastructure with fiber optics, with wireless, with resilience for hurricanes, and other things that, and public Wi-Fi networks that would allow us really to connect and to provide the data and the services that we needed. So later we were able to build that cyber physical systems layer of smart sensors collecting environmental data from water quality, from air quality, collecting traffic and behavioral data and trends from vehicle traffic, pedestrian traffic analytics, and also collecting public safety and traffic safety data, very important, almost in real time in most cases. So all that data, all that insight allowed us to aggregate and correlate the data in our clouds, distributed clouds, and those data platforms and data centers is what allows us really to apply the analytics, artificial intelligence, horizontal integration, and make sense of all that big data. So it's millions of data points daily, basically. So we have to analyze that with a lot of artificial intelligence and power that brings value, otherwise overwhelms your capacity. So our Smart City Hub basically is a platform that brings all that equity and all that value. And to the right, you have a horizontal integration model that basically applies rules of governance and cybersecurity, and making sure that when we do this, we are compliant. So we are a highly regulated agency. If we can go to the next slide, just to wrap it up. This shows you some screenshots from the Smart City Hub, like dashboards in real time from sensors, from analytics, the Community Intelligence Center for Public Safety and First Responders, LiDAR data, and other equity that we provide through our platform. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was an excellent tour, and it makes me want to visit Coral Gables every time you give that presentation. Thank you very much.
You are welcome to visit us. Thank you.
Now, all this data is not going to be useful unless the citizens have a lot of trust in it, and we know that it's going to be available, and it's going to be able to help us inform our operational decisions. And that requires a lot of privacy and security, right, Lan? And you can unmute.
Glenn, yes, Glenn, you named it. And to that point, Raimundo's example is such uplifting music to our ears, because a lot of people say, you know, we only have this much budget and this short amount of time. We can't get everything done all in the very beginning. But as Raimondo has showcased, it's doable. And we have other examples to show that it's doable. So next, I would like to just have a high-level overview of how it can be doable. As well as pointing out that good use cases, this is how we're trying to do it. Smart people have done things to everyone's benefit. But if their good examples are not learned, picked up by everyone else, then everyone else still has to reinvent the wheels. And that's a disservice and a waste that can be avoided. So to that effect, I just wanted to mention that Raimondo's example as a use case has been baked in to our super clusters guidebook. Everyone can actually pick it up from the guidebook that's listed on the NIST pages, super GCTC super clusters. So later on, I will post the URL in the chat window. And besides our own, the Cybersecurity and Privacy Advisory Committee's guidebook, there are a lot of other good playbooks or blueprints published there under GCTC. So just a quick mentioning to pay tribute to all the brilliant work that people like Raimondo, Haiti, and I can't remember the name, let me see, Heather, right? Thank you, have done. So now back to what I wanted to share about it can be done, the can-do attitude. How are we supporting that? One attitude alone can't build the world up. So if we could advance to the next slide, please. So now, the first and foremost thing is trust. We know smart cities or smart communities cannot be smart if it does not have people's trust. And how do we get there? It needs to be independent, non-commercial, and high-level transparency, and also needs to be up to date. And to the end users, ultimately the public, it needs to be intuitive. Can we reproduce the Apple phone-like experience? It's a tall order, but we can aspire. If we don't aspire, we're not going anywhere. So the trust element needs to be baked in for any smart city, smart community projects. Earlier, the speakers also alluded to that. It's not just a why, it's also they want it. So that also has 11 trust characteristics that CISA recently, well, earlier this year, published such a document that ties not only the cybersecurity and privacy as a part of the foundation for trust, but also there are a couple of other characteristics. And so with that, you can see that this public-private partnership has all of these elements. Moving on to our next slide, please. And also to bake it in, it needs to have these elements: affordable, good, and fast. And so this public-private partnership indeed has all these three elements baked in. So contact us and reach out to the URL that I'm posting here shortly. Thank you, Glenn.
Well, thank you very much, Lam. That's really very instructive, and we'll try to remember these triangles. These triangles are very important pieces of what we're trying to do. If you're in the audience, we'd love to have some questions for the panelists after we hear from Jerry. So there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you begin putting the questions in there, notice that Matt Bishop has put one into the chat, but put them into the Q&A because they have a whole system for the moderator like me to be able to catch those from the Q&A. Jerry, The Internet of Things has, of course, taken over. I've been outnumbered in my house by all of my smart things. I think they gang up on me from time to time. Tell us about how we can better organize them and help them to serve our smart communities. And unmute, please.
Macy, can you go to the next slide? So to talk a little bit about I3 and what we're doing in Los Angeles, we realized as we were working through data sharing and how do we do and prepare for the next generation of what we're doing in data is that there were some tools that were missing, and we actually set out to create the i3 software, which is available on open source, and there's also an industrialized version that will soon be coming to market as well. And it's really designed to sort of focus on the management, the infrastructure layer that's associated with IoT data, but really we have a pretty expansive definition of what's IoT, so you really can almost replace that with real-time data streams. The trick here is what we want to do is we wanted to create a data management hub so that centrally you could manage the data, but decentralize control, which is kind of a trick because you sort of have to balance both ends of the blade. And when you create that kind of environment, you sort of have to realize that you have different kinds of users participating in creating that data ecosystem. I mean, there are data producers, there are data consumers, there are administrators, and all of these people want to have easy access so you can easily administer and deal with these problems, these issues as the data flows as they go through your network. But it's really sort of a multifaceted way of looking at how do you do data. The other thing that we realized quite early on was that a lot of what happens and doesn't happen, what flows and doesn't flow, is related to, and Glenn mentioned privacy, security, those are important, but data policies, incentives, we think about trust, but we think about these things as all being sort of very fluid issues that need to be managed. I mean, you can change your data policy. Maybe one day someone trusts the city, one department in the city, the next day they're kind of upset about something, so they don't. So we have to start thinking about these things as being very fluidly managed. And then finally, we have to sort of structure the system so that it can grow over time and it makes economic sense early on, that as things grow, it still makes sense and evolves over time. Because these systems are certainly going to grow both, and it has a dollar sign there, but I guess we could also put a clock there because you have to think about how do you manage time and money. Those are both precious resources for any city, county, or state government. So these are the kind of issues that we sort of set out to tackle when we began doing this work. Can we go to the next slide? So just a couple of quick examples to sort of explain what we're doing. One of them is this idea of intelligent video systems. Vehicles in the city, they drive over the city streets every day. Right now, if you look at like the sanitation trucks, our sanitation trucks have 4 video cameras on them, and they drive every week over all the cities. Right now, those cameras are being used to manage safety and health issues related, accidents. Is the forklift up or down, trying to sort of manage those kind of issues. And those are important issues to the sanitation department. But what we want to do is be able to use those video streams not just as an asset for the sanitation department, but be able to do things like scanning the road for potholes and being able to measure maybe this crack's getting bigger, so now we can schedule people to go out in a more efficient way to take care of the roads, or to be scanning for graffiti or objects by the side of the road, maybe vegetation's overgrown, and then feeding information from that to maybe the cleanup crews that have to go out and clean the graffiti, the people who do permits to go and take a look at vegetation and see if it's violating ordinances. So we want to take those cameras that are currently an asset to the sanitation department and make them an asset to the city across the board. And that really changes the way financially you think about data, where it comes from and how it's used. It's a really different mindset from top to bottom. Next slide. There we go. This is just another example, real quick. I got a minute left, and this is related to parking. Parking in LA, it's a mesh of different parking options. Some of them are parking meters, some are city garages, and then there's lots and lots of different private parking options. Of course, everybody has different standards, so they're generating data differently, they're measuring things differently, but what we want to do is be able to take the data from all these different sources, integrate it together to create a composite view of what's the parking situation in Los Angeles, so that when you're driving into town, you go to a place where you can find parking instead of driving around having to hunt for parking spaces. The other thing that we want to do is be able to take this data, once we've compiled it together and built this composite view, is be able to link it into wayfinding applications from different vendors for different purposes. So it's really sort of trying to take and integrate from a data sharing perspective, lots of different kinds of data, lots of different sources, lots of different formats and standards, integrated together and provided out differently, but do so because the citizens really don't care about the data format, where it came from or how it got there. They just want to get to a parking place. And that's one of the things I3 was designed to do, was to sort of be the vehicle to steer traffic in that, data traffic in that kind of situation. With that, I will close, because it gives you sort of a sense of what we're trying to do.
Thanks, Jerry. That does give us a really good sense of what I3 is doing. I think that's a really very important project and issue. So I'd like to run the Q&A as kind of a jump ball situation. So I'm going to toss out a question, and we'll see who hits the yellow box around you first, if it can give us an answer. And I'd like to start with the question of, how is the Global City Teams Challenge Data Hub and Service Delivery Platform related to the Open Civic Architectural Framework? Who wants to grab that one?
I'll get that one. So the data hub and the service, you can think of the data hub and the service delivery platform as the product of what we'll be developing. And the Open Civic Architectural Framework is the blueprint for the product. It's a reference framework, like I had mentioned earlier, and we're hoping to bring together a good group of collaborators to develop out the end product.
Okay. Any other comments from the other panelists? I think you should all unmute yourselves and just jump in here. This is the interesting part.
Just as an observation to sort of tie together what we're all doing. So Lan was talking about privacy, security, trust. The framework that you mentioned, I mean, that's the architecture. To win trust, you sort of have to be open and transparent about what you're doing. So the framework that Heather was talking about, yeah, you need the framework, but by disclosing it to people, you help to build trust, which is important to Lan. And if anybody who's online wants to go look at Coral Gables' website, you can see that they've got online, published online, they're showing what their architecture is, what they're trying to do, and where they're going. So all of this stuff that we're talking about really does tie pretty tightly together once you sort of step back and look at the big picture.
Very true. This is Lan. I just want to mention that down the line, some people are also adding another third-party voice into the whole dynamics. So there is a famous saying, trust but verify, right? So there will be some brilliant people working together to provide that independent third-person view. Purely for the public interest, not driven or tied with any commercial purposes at all.
We have a question here from Carolyn Corey. How do the panelists see the electric sector interacting with all of this data? I'm thinking of distributed energy resources, on-site generation, and any services where electricity is critical for providing services.
I would say that the electrical utilities, they play a big role because that infrastructure at the end will merge. You remember a time when the TV and media all merged into the internet, So at the end, we are going to have an internet of cities where utilities and data providers and consumers, they will interact in common frameworks. So that fusion of frameworks and value is going to happen with collaboration with the utility companies and with the private sector and with government.
Any other comments?
Yeah, so, and we're sort of just, this is sort of free open chat. But you can imagine, like, if the open framework that we're building in these cities is now able to monitor where people are in the cities. I mean, just physically, how many people, how many cars, where they're at, to give you a better real-time view of what's going on in the city. You could use that data that could be taken on by the power companies, and they could be using that to sort of adjust and change the way the power flows through the grid, so that we're not just talking about maybe energy changing, the price of energy changing based on time of day, but by where the people are and where the demand is kind of real time. So you start thinking about how all this stuff interconnects together, and it's really kind of mind-boggling to think of where it might go.
Lots of possibilities. Hey, Raimundo, there's a specific question for you. Your app store. We have Matt Bishop wanting to know about how he can shop in your app store and what's in there.
The App Store is one of the elements in the Smart City Hub. Basically, it's a collection of apps. Some of them have been developed by our team. Some of them are public-private partnerships. Like, for example, our electric vehicle shuttle program with Freebie is a partnership. And our trolley systems app, and we have an aggregation app. It's called the Coral Gables mobile app that aggregates all those together in one place. So we want the citizens to be able to find everything, whenever they need it, everywhere, anywhere they are.
Well, thank you. We're asked, what is the best practice for encouraging data sharing across silos and jurisdictions? That's got to be a key issue for everybody. Who would like to take that first?
This is Heidi, and my only comment is good attorneys that understand why you're data sharing. That's really been probably my biggest challenge, and I don't know. When it becomes obvious to data stewards or people who hold the data in those silos, I think that's when you can make the most of it. But it really comes down to change management and cultural shift, in my experience, rather than we know the technology is there, but it's getting folks to really be open to saying, okay, maybe from my data set, it says this thing, and yours that is similar says something else. Like, let's figure out what the difference is, and really being open to that feedback, rather than, we had an embarrassing gaffe where we reported firearm deaths from one system, and we looked at our vital statistics system, and it of course had a different number that was also reported. And it's like, we're like, guys, come on, like, talk to each other. It's okay. But, until you can really get out of that way of thinking, I think it's very difficult until you have an impetus or having it come from above. Like, why can't you get this data shared? And when it usually comes down to one data steward saying no, it really, like, you have to really herd the cats.
And on that point, if I may also mention that there have been some ways to help simplify this a little bit, because data, as we know, the 2080 rule, oftentimes if you consider it all as a whole, it's just too mumbo-jumbled and too massive to even tackle. So instead, if you can consider them under our CPAC, the Cybersecurity and Privacy Advisory Committee, we have an action cluster that has published a architecture that is cloud security that suggests that, hey, we could do it in an economically way that the crucial data, consider red. Everyone knows this red coloring coordination, and yellow is kind of somewhere in between, and the the regular green is, hey, that is great for everyone to consume and to know. That's transparency also comes to be built on. And with that, it adds a bit more pragmatic element to it. So that's one thing. Another thing I have recently come to be aware of is that there is a nonprofit that's also publishing data in close collaboration with universities. And so but data owners, they get to specify, but the nonprofit also has a way to curate, to help because of their experience, and they have privacy and security all built in together with us. And then that outcome, therefore, is interoperable across multiple publishing organizations. So that's just another thing for everyone to know. If anyone wants to know the organization, you can pin me.
Jerry, I know you have an opinion on how to get across silos because you've got lots of data coming from lots of places, and I've share that point of view, please.
So there's a couple of things that, well, I'm going to say it from the base, and I think this is what Len and Heidi were talking about, was transparency is really important. I mean, when you're sharing data, you have to be transparent with the person you're sharing with, things like the data policy. I mean, what is the organization going to do to support and change it? Why do they need it? What are they going to use it for? So this, and this is where lawyers come in, because they can help you make sure this stuff is well articulated and well defined. So transparency is like a critical fact before you even get started. But then after you get the transparency rules and all this stuff out and defined, you also have to be able to think about, well, what happens if? And maybe the other party ended up misinterpreting something. Maybe they were unscrupulous and did something other than what was in the policy or the transparency, but you have to have sort of a recourse of what do you do. The lawyers will tell you, well, yeah, then you go to court, but that's a long process, especially today, because courts. So you actually be able to need to take action right away and sort of sort through things. So you have to assume that there's a degree of fluidity in the process and what's going on. And there's lots of stories around what happens if you don't do this, or this happens or that happens. But a lot of transparency is the starting place, but then you've got to be able to think about what happens after that if expectations weren't met.
That's right. And I think metadata is also an important part of this, right, Heather?
It is. It's a very important part. And one of the things that if we're ever going to get to the point where we're sharing data across these silos, especially if we're talking about, data even between our information systems internally, or we're talking about data across states so that we can track things like pandemics, we have to develop the ontologies. And to develop those standardized ontologies, to be able to do that, we have to come together in groups, and we have to decide, what is that data exchange ontology going to look like? In addition, those ontologies, because they define our entities and our properties and so forth, they're also in excellent way to publish a data catalog, because you're not directly putting out the information. You're not directly putting out your data, you're putting out information on the types of data that you have. So you could, for instance, say, without exposing any data at all, that the Department of Health and Social Services in one state, or Department of Health and Social Services in another state, has certain data, so that constituents and businesses, civic entrepreneurs, are even aware of the types of data that could be available. And then from there, one of the biggest challenges of working with siloed data is that it's non-standardized. And then if you have that ontology and you have the properties outlined in the ontology and the entities, you can then standardize your data based on that. And you can actually map data from multiple systems back to multiple ontologies, and then cleanse and standardize the data at that point, and use master data management to save the data so it can be exchanged back with the originating information system. So I'd say if we're gonna talk about, if I could say one thing that is really going to help the future of sharing data, especially in silos, it's that semantic layer, and it's developing those ontologies.
I agree with that. US Ignite has done some work in the data cataloging area together with 8 CIOs across the Smart Connected Community Network of US Ignite. And on the us-ignite.org website, there's a data tools. Under data tools, you'll find the cataloging agreement that those folks came to. And I think it's a useful way of organizing information that the NIST framework provides. So it's another piece that we can go and put together into this puzzle that we're assembling of all the things we need to have effective data sharing. I've got a complicated question here. I'm going to move my head over to the side to read to you. It's from John, it's probably Griffin. Sharing, have you thought about moving analytics rather than moving the data? Shared analytics is an approach to leaving data with the owner and moving the analytics to the data. It could reduce legal, privacy, competitive constraints, as well as reduce data understanding and cleaning by having the owners provide that to be part of the network. And for full disclosure, he's on the IEEE P2795, where we are trying to create a standard for this moving the analytics to the data.
So that is something you have to think about. It's certainly something that I don't want to say keeps us up at night, because I think we're part of the answer to that question, but by all means, we're not the complete answer. So just like this is a pie with all of us having issues associated with it, I think this is one of those complicated issues. We have envisioned, when we think about this, the idea that there are data analytics center that are sort of maybe central to a city or to a county. But then there's also, as the data analytics moves, it's not just, it can move to different places, so that the data analytics processes can also move into being sort of departmental specific. So maybe, and a good example, the police has very different privacy and data needs than maybe the Parks Department does. So there's some analytics that you want to do centrally, some you want to move into departmental specific processors. But then over time, the other thing that we're looking towards is moving data analytics first, maybe being close to a data hub. So maybe there's a data analytics engine that talks to a bunch of different IoT devices and is doing some local compression, doing some local identification of issues. And then even long-term, some of those data analytics process, they begin to move into IoT devices specifically. And I'm not saying any one is right or wrong, but you have to be able to sort of think about them running in all places at the same time simultaneously, because what's right for one city might be different for another city, and the answers might even be different depending on the application. So you really have to be able to think about all of them as being valid.
I think this has been a terrific panel. You guys have really put a lot of the issues on the table for us. If you could show us the ending slide, Macy. And I would like everybody in the audience who thinks this has been a terrific panel to just put a word applause or a little clap of your hands into the chat so that we can all see that there's people out there who've been listening. We would really appreciate this, because these panelists have done a terrific job and really deserve that. So remember, we've really talked about 4 things that fit together today. One is the data hub idea, and that group is shared by data sharing between smart city applications, and Heather and Heidi are the ones who have been focusing on that. And you can go and take a look there at their emails and write them down there in the slides. And you can always, of course, get back to the GCTC leadership, and we can also saying retweet. No, we'll re-email that. We looked at the Smart City public platform that's from Coral Gables. Thank you very much, Raimundo, for that. The secure cloud architecture, we can't forget that. It's an indispensable part of what needs to be done. data management. Thank you so much for that, Lan. We appreciate your efforts there. And Jerry, last but not least, again, thank you very much for the I3 consortium and helping to organize this whole session and showing how all of these really fit together. And look at that. We've got lots of good things happening in the chat. All you panelists go and take a look at the chat. And my applause too. Great session. Thank you very much, everybody.